My fiancé left me for my estranged twin sister at the altar. A year later, his mother's call revealed the truth that shattered them both. I, female, 27, have had a strained relationship with my family for as long as I can remember. I have a twin sister, Talia, and it had been clear early on that she was the golden child. I don't know how this happens with a pair of twins, but here we are. I always believed that the golden child is either an overachiever, shares similar interests with the parents, or is somehow different in a positive way from other children in the house. But in this case, Talia and I were mirror images of each other. We had the same interests. We both did well in school. Everything was similar. So I could not, for the life of me, understand why my parents loved her more, because they did. They used to try and hide it initially. But I always felt this way, even as a kid. I remember breaking down one day and telling them that I felt overlooked and unloved, but nothing changed. It was always Talia first. Talia over everyone and everything else. The favoritism was subtle at first. If they got us toys or clothes, Talia got the first pick. Even if these things were identical, they were not always the same color. And Talia always made the choice. I had to just make do with whatever she decided wasn't worth her time or something she didn't like. If I protested, I got lectures about how I was being selfish, about how the gifts were the same anyway, and about how I'd never get far in life if I acted so entitled. Then gradually, it got worse. Talia enjoyed the attention and pampering, and I hated her for it, so we were never close. This rift between us widened in middle school when she isolated herself from our friend group and started hanging out with the cool kids. In a way, that was better for me because I could now at least have my friends to myself and live in peace at school. Initially, our friends were shocked at her sudden change, but they grew accustomed to it, and my friendship with them grew stronger. Throughout middle and high school, the rift between Talia and me kept widening. By the time we graduated, we had completely different interests and distinct social circles. This worked for me because it meant less interaction with her. She was still mean, especially in school, because she wanted to look cool for her peers, but I was very used to her, so it never fazed me. Anyway, it was at the end of school that things between us escalated to levels I will never recover from, and I haven't been in contact with her since. I worked very hard on my college applications because I knew what I wanted to do. Plus, almost all my friends wanted to go to good places and do well for themselves. I hadn't known about Talia's preparation for her essays, and I wasn't nosy, so I never asked. But she looked way too confident about her admissions for someone who wasn't prepared, or at least didn't know what to do. To my dismay, she got in, and I didn't. Long story short, I found out in the nick of time that she had stolen my essay and submitted it. I was furious and didn't want to tell my parents because, as always, they would have said that I needed to suck it up and that now nothing could be done. I was done being nice and trampled on. I decided to go nuclear. I emailed the university with details about her plagiarism, showing them how this work was mine. I also told them about the situation at home and requested them to be mindful if and when they responded to her. Well, they did, and they blacklisted her, citing that they had found that she engaged in plagiarism during her application. When she got the email, she sat in disbelief and looked at me with such hate I thought I would collapse, but she couldn't admit anything to mom and dad. What could she have said? That she stole my essay? I knew I had caught her in a bad position, and I was more than elated that she was getting her due. The situation was tense and hilarious, at least for me. I knew what she had done, and she knew what I had done, and I didn't want to go to mom and dad for resolution, and she couldn't go because that would mean admitting she stole my work. Unfortunately for her, mom and dad were heartbroken by this injustice. They were sure they wanted to take it up with the university, insisting there was no plagiarism involved. It's here that things got messy. My parents sent the email, and what they got in return was a detailed reply about her application and the source she stole from, my work. I foolishly hoped that when they saw what their precious daughter had done to me, they'd finally see her for who she was. And maybe, just maybe, I would become an important part of the family. What happened was quite the opposite. I was yelled at for days for purposely ruining Talia's life and career. The moment they learned I was the one who reported the plagiarism, they found someone to hound. No matter that she stole my work, no matter that she was in the wrong, and no matter that it was because of her that I couldn't go, the only thing that mattered was that I outed her without consulting them. They called me every name in the book and said the right thing to do would have been to talk to them about it, and then they would have come up with a solution. I told them their only solution would have been to let her go scot-free, and I would have been asked to just suck it up and apply elsewhere. It was a mess at home, and no one was willing to see my perspective. It had become clear that no matter what I did, I'd be the black sheep, and no matter what Talia did, she would never face the consequences. The next few months were brutal, but I was just waiting for college. I knew that the minute I stepped out of the house, I wouldn't be coming back. There was nothing to come back to anyway, and that's what I did. I left for college and immediately went low contact with my parents and no contact with Talia. She was dead to me after her little stunt, and I didn't want anything to do with her ever again. College was a refreshing change. I made good friends, had a good life, worked hard. I met Matt in college, and we hit it off instantly. Matt and I were friends for a couple of years. He was my senior in college, but we shared the same friend circle. Right before he graduated, he asked me to be his girlfriend, and I said yes. He was one of my closest friends, and I was extremely happy in his company. So, to me, the logical next step was a relationship. When I said yes, he told me he'd had a crush on me for years and had been trying to muster the courage to ask me out. I honestly thought this was adorable, and I told him I would have said yes even if he had asked me earlier. We had a good relationship for all it was worth. We were already very good friends, so we knew each other well. There was a level of comfort and honesty, and it just came naturally. I also told him about the entire situation with my family. I explained that I was extremely low contact with my parents and absolutely no contact with my sister and that nothing could ever make me talk to her again, and I asked him to respect that. He thought it was absurd that a family could be so dysfunctional because his family is picture perfect. His parents are madly in love. He's the oldest of 4 siblings, and they are all close and supportive. My ordeal was alien to him. I respected that and respected and enjoyed the family dynamic he came from. It was honestly adorable, the love they shared. I'd always been deprived of it, so I couldn't help but feel a little jealous, but I made it clear to him that he should never expect me to go back to my family and try to sort things out just because it was impossible for him to conceive of dysfunctional families. He seemed okay with it, which is why I trusted him. I never knew that this was going to end up being the worst time of my life. 2 years ago, when I was 25, Matt proposed. I obviously said yes. We had been dating for close to 4 years by then, and I was sure he was the guy I wanted to spend my life with. He introduced me to his family earlier, and they accepted me with open arms. I felt like I finally had a family. Even his siblings, 2 sisters and 1 brother, were extremely welcoming, and I developed independent relationships with each of them. It was like I had become a part of the family before I even married him. Marriage was the next step, and I was very, very happy with my relationship and the life I had built. We were supposed to get married last year. The entire year before that was spent planning for the wedding, the honeymoon, and everything else. It was a stressful time, and it was also a little challenging for our relationship because that's when I realized there were differences between us, and working through them required effort. Nonetheless, we pushed through willingly. We had one of our biggest fights while finalizing the guest list. I wanted a small, intimate wedding, but he had a lot of guests. He wanted his immediate family, some uncles, aunts, his siblings, partners, and others. I, on the other hand, had no family I wanted to invite. I wasn't close with anyone. I told him I would only be inviting my friends, and I honestly did not want my family anywhere near me on my wedding day. At first, he agreed, but I could see his hesitation. I asked him if there was a problem. He said no, so I dropped it. A week later, however, he came to me and said that I needed to invite my family because there would be no wedding without family present. I looked at him with wide eyes and told him I had always made it clear that my family wasn't a part of my life. They didn't even know I was engaged, and that the only 2 people needed for a wedding were the bride and groom, so there was no reason to be worked up about my parents not attending. He wouldn't back down. He said that whatever fight I had with them could be set aside for one day and that he wasn't asking me to start a relationship with them or forgive them just to invite them to the wedding. I told him that any invitation would mean I wanted to mend things, and that was the last thing I wanted to do. In hindsight, I should have left him right there. I could see that, despite claiming to understand my reality and childhood, which I always was transparent about, he had chosen to throw this at me. But I was a fool in love. We fought a lot, and I almost stopped talking to him, but deep down I knew we needed to reach a compromise. After a lot of back and forth, he finally told me why he insisted on inviting my family. He said he didn't want his family to think he was marrying a woman who didn't have a good relationship with her family. His family is very conservative that way. They have always lived with a family-first rule. And he felt that my parents' absence would reflect poorly, and he didn't want that for me. At that time, I thought his thought process was caring and thoughtful. But I gradually realized how problematic it was. He was more worried about the impression his family would get, especially his extended family, because his parents and siblings already knew I didn't get along well with mine, than about what it would do to me psychologically. The show was more important to him than his bride, and I should have seen that. I didn't, and I paid the price. After a lot of back and forth, I agreed to call my parents, but that was where I drew the line. I told him I would have them there, but no other family members, especially not Talia. There would be no father-daughter dance, and my family would not be allowed to give speeches. That was the only condition for inviting them, and he had to meet me halfway. Thankfully, he agreed. And he knew he didn't have much of a choice. I also warned him not to contact anyone on his own. Only I would call them up and invite them, and only when I felt the time was right. I knew if I gave them the information too early, they would make something up and get Talia to tag along, which I just couldn't agree to. And honestly, I also hoped that if I told them late enough, maybe they wouldn't be able to make it. So, I would technically be in the right and still end up having my way. I think Matt suspected this, but even if he did, he didn't say anything. So, that was that. I informed Mom and Dad 6 weeks before the wedding, and they said that obviously the entire family would be there to support me on my special day. I cut them off right there and told them that there was absolutely no way Talia was coming to my wedding. It was just the two of them invited, and if they tried to be sneaky and brought her anyway, I would escort them out myself. They tried protesting, saying it was the perfect time for the family to reunite and that I needed to stop being a baby and that I had had my revenge and should be satisfied. I told them this was my only contact with them before the wedding. They knew the venue and the time, and if they wanted to come, they could. However, if they tried anything, I wouldn't hesitate to take necessary steps, and I disconnected the call. I thought that was a stern enough warning to deter them from planning anything, but I was very wrong. And I should have known that Talia would turn up and make a mess of things. She did make a mess, but it was much bigger than I expected. A week before the wedding, my parents flew down and checked into a hotel. They had informed me that they'd come a week early, wanted to give me something, and wanted me to come along with Matt. I was reluctant because I didn't want all those feelings and angst resurfacing just a week before my wedding. But Matt said I should go and that he would come with me. And at the sight of any misbehavior, we'd walk out. That made me feel a little better, and we decided to go. To my surprise, but I'm sure many of you guessed it, Talia was there. This was what they wanted to give me, a chance for a heart-to-heart and a reconciliation. The moment I saw her, I wanted to get up and leave, but I somehow stayed frozen. I looked at Matt, and he sat down, and then they got to talking. It was all a load of bull crap, and honestly, I don't even remember what they said. I was just zoned out and mentally paralyzed. All I could see was an ambush. I think I snapped back to reality a few minutes later, and I got up, grabbed Matt, and told him we were leaving. He resisted. He said we should just sort this out. And I told him I was going, and he was free to play happy families with them all he wanted, and I stormed off. I checked into a hotel and sent him a text that I was there and would talk when I felt better, and then switched my phone off. I think I drowned an entire bottle of wine, and I woke up feeling dizzy the next day. I turned my phone back on, expecting a few texts at the very least, but there was nothing. Matt had not reached out to me. It felt weird because he generally isn't the kind to give me space. He likes to resolve issues instantly. I waited a few more hours to see if he texted, but he hadn't. I called him that night, and my call went to voicemail. He had ghosted me a week before the wedding. I still don't have it in me to recount what happened in those 7 days, but I knew the wedding was off. He was completely unresponsive, and he wasn't talking to his family either. Nobody knew what was up with him. It was like he had vanished. So, I called the caterers and everyone else and told them the wedding was off. I blocked him on the day of our wedding and stayed with a friend until I sorted my stuff. 2 months later, I found out he had married Talia on the same day he was supposed to marry me. It was outrageous. I felt like I was in a horror movie. I just couldn't understand how something like this happened and why he would behave like that and end up marrying my sister, whom he had met just a week ago. It made no sense to me. I was a mess when I found out. It felt like she had won again, and there was nothing I could do. It was just horrible, and I was in one of the darkest phases of my life. I had to rebuild myself emotionally from scratch. And it took every ounce of strength not to keep tabs on them. I was doing better, much better. And then yesterday, I got a call from Matt's mother, Nancy. She said she wanted to meet me. I don't want to meet her. I don't want anything to do with him anymore. But I just cannot go through this again. She was in tears, begging me to meet her one last time. And I don't know what to do. I have never seen her this way, and maybe meeting her will help me get some closure. But I don't want all my progress to shatter. I feel so helpless right now, and I need advice. It was therapeutic and saddening at the same time. But I finally learned what had really happened after I left. It's a mess. And even though I feel vindicated, I feel bad about everything that's happened. She told me that after I stormed off, my parents and Talia fed Matt some story about my childhood and why I was no contact. And the worst part is that he believed them. He believed every single word, which is why he didn't reach out to me for days after. She said he was in too much of a mess to think rationally. But then I had called the caterers and decorators and canceled everything. He received confirmation calls from them, and he panicked. He thought I was canceling the wedding. And in some twisted way, he took that as confirmation of me being in the wrong and believed whatever my parents told him. Nancy said Matt was a mess after finding out, and he stupidly went to my parents for advice. They suggested he could marry Talia for the ceremony so he wouldn't be ridiculed by his family, and then Talia and he could get the marriage annulled or divorced once the fuss died down. Nancy said the entire family was against this stupid decision and kept telling him that canceling the wedding was better than marrying my twin, but he seemed to lose all sense. He went ahead with a plan because he didn't want to deal with the shame of being left at the altar. And ever since, Talia has refused to divorce him. She's been dragging the marriage along, saying she won't divorce him, and if she does, she'll demand a hefty alimony. It's a train wreck through and through, and Matt had no choice but to continue. But a few days ago, things changed. Talia, in a drunken state, told Matt the truth about everything, how they had trapped him, and how foolish he had been. She also revealed the essay she stole from me, admitting that everything they told him about me was a lie. Matt has been depressed since then. He hasn't gone home, hasn't picked up her calls or anyone else's for that matter. And only 2 days ago did Nancy finally get hold of him. He's devastated. He told Nancy he made the biggest mistake of his life and had no idea how he could ever apologize to me. He said it serves him right because of how he broke my heart, but he said all he wanted was a chance to talk to me so that he could explain his side, and we could then see what to do. I stared at Nancy, my eyes wide with disbelief. I made it crystal clear that any notion of us between Matt and me was long dead, and if he harbored even a flicker of hope otherwise, he was living in a delusion. I told her point blank that I had zero intention of speaking to him, not now, not ever. He had made his choices, dug his own hole, and now he could rot in it for all I cared. He was legally my sister's husband, and no matter how twisted the path that led them to the altar, I refused to insert myself into their chaos or lift a finger to pull him out. Nancy broke down in tears at my words, her sobs echoing in the quiet room as she pleaded with me to reconsider, to give him just one chance. But I stood firm, my mind was made up, and no amount of begging could sway me. I had finally closed that painful chapter of my life, and the idea of cracking it open again filled me with dread. She wouldn't let it go, insisting that a single conversation might change everything, that I owed it to myself to hear him out before deciding for good. I muttered that I'd think about it, more to escape the pressure than anything else, and then I walked out. The weight of the encounter left me reeling, my thoughts a tangled storm. Since then, she's sent several messages, each one tugging at my resolve, but I've left them unread. I'm at a complete loss. The thought of diving back into that emotional wreckage exhausts me, I simply don't have the strength to revisit the pain. In the end, nothing explosive unfolded, if that's the kind of twist you were anticipating. For the sake of my own sanity and the fragile peace I'd managed to build, I chose not to meet with Matt. I laid it all out for Nancy in a message that I hoped would end the conversation once and for all. I expressed sympathy for the mess they were in, but I emphasized that Matt had brought this upon himself by siding with virtual strangers, my manipulative family, over the woman he claimed to love, all because he couldn't stomach the idea of a little social embarrassment. I reminded her that a year ago, I was in an infinitely darker place, abandoned and shattered, with no one to turn to. I didn't have parents to console me, no family checking in to see if I was okay. Matt, on the other hand, was surrounded by a supportive network, yet he squandered his chance with me. Forgiveness? He hadn't earned it, and I wasn't in the business of handing it out freely. I didn't stick around for her response. The moment the message sent, I blocked her number. I was done with the guilt trips, the emotional manipulation disguised as concern. I know this paints me as cold, maybe even cruel, for refusing to help him climb out of the pit he fell into. But deep down, I see it as the universe balancing the scales, karma delivering a long overdue reckoning. I had to claw my way back from rock bottom entirely on my own, piecing together a life from the ruins without a single lifeline. Why shouldn't he experience that same isolation, that same ache of regret? It's only just that he confronts the consequences of his cowardice without me swooping in to save the day. I sincerely hope this is the last I hear from any of them, though a nagging intuition tells me they might try again, perhaps through a different phone, a mutual friend, or some other roundabout way. But I've drawn an unbreakable line. No matter the method, I won't engage. I won't read the texts, won't answer the calls, won't acknowledge their existence. Whatever path Matt chooses next, whether he remains trapped in that sham of a marriage or fights tooth and nail for a divorce, is entirely between him and Talia, his so-called wife. My heart holds no lingering affection for either of them. That well ran dry the moment the truth surfaced. This marks the definitive end for me, a clean severance from the toxicity that once defined so much of my world. In a strange way, knowing how profoundly this has wrecked him provides a measure of solace, a quiet closure I didn't expect. It eases my mind at night, this awareness that he's finally grasping the magnitude of his betrayal, the irreplaceable treasure he threw away simply because he feared a fleeting whisper of gossip among his circle. Let that lesson sink in deep. Stupidity like his comes with a steep price, and he's paying it in full. To expand on the whirlwind of emotions that followed my initial refusal, I spent days oscillating between anger and a hollow numbness. Part of me replayed Nancy's tear-streaked face, wondering if my hardness stemmed from self-preservation or something darker, like vengeance. Yet every time doubt crept in, I'd remind myself of the timeline, the ambush meeting, Matt's silence, the cancelled wedding, and then, insult upon injury, discovering he'd married Talia on our intended date. That sequence wasn't a misunderstanding, it was a deliberate chain of betrayals. Nancy's revelations about Talia's drunken confession and Matt's subsequent breakdown didn't erase the hurt, they only highlighted how avoidable it all was if he'd trusted me even a fraction. I journaled furiously those nights, pouring out the resentment toward my parents for orchestrating the lie, toward Talia for her endless sabotage, and toward Matt for prioritizing optics over loyalty. Therapy sessions helped, too. My counselor affirmed that boundaries aren't brutality, they're survival. Blocking Nancy wasn't impulsive, it was a necessary shield against further erosion of my progress. As for the karma angle, it's not about wishing ill, it's about equity. I rebuilt alone, new routines, deeper friendships, a promotion at work that demanded focus I channeled from pain. Matt's family, for all their picture-perfect facade, enabled his panic-driven decisions by not intervening forcefully enough. Now they're grappling with the fallout, and while I pity Nancy as a mother, her son's actions aren't my burden. If he truly regrets it, let him prove it through actions that don't involve me, legal battles, therapy, whatever it takes to untangle from Talia without dragging me back in. My closure comes from detachment, from recognizing that their drama is a self-contained storm I no longer need to weather. Sleep comes easier now, unburdened by what-ifs. The chapter is sealed, the book closed, and I'm turning the page to a future unshadowed by their mistakes.